Welcome to episode 92 of Rubbish Talk with me, Alasdair Meldrum.
And me, Vicki Hughes.
Caught you by surprise there,
You
Vicki Hughes. We hadn't prepped that bit, sorry.
There you go.
And welcome to our first episode of 2026. Unfortunately, Jane Bond can't be with us, but she will be back with us next week. In fact, that's a lie. Our first episode actually went out on New Year's Day, so this is actually our second episode. But we had pre-recorded that before. So, Vicki, can you tell me a wee bit about yourself, who you work for, your number of hats that you wear? Because I know you've got a number of hats on, so maybe the day job first and then the other hats you have.
Yeah, sure. So I'm MD of McPhee Associates, which is a business development consultancy. We do all sorts of different things. It's been running for about 22, 23 years now and ran in parallel when I was working at Hadfields. Was actually what I started doing, which was going in and looking at businesses, trying to help them to grow, develop. And one of my first clients I went to see was actually Hadfields in Manchester. I went in to do 6 days work, and here I am 20 plus years later, still in the sector. So it's a reoccurring theme, I think, isn't it, for a lot of people in this industry?
And what's Hadfield's core work then? What do they do?
Wood recycling. So Hadfields Wood Recyclers, which was sold to Ember Wood Recycling. So we sold in 2018.
That's how you had a successful career into the waste management sector.
Yeah, that's how I got in. But so McPhee does a lot of different things. I work quite a lot with companies who might be having issues with permitting. I do quite a lot of liaison with the regulators and do quite a lot around communication and business development generally. So a lot of people start with, I've got a product, I want to find a sales and marketing strategy. So my background is sort of strategic sales and marketing. But actually what I tend to find is when I start talking to people, it's more around the culture. It's about the management team. It's about the exec function. A lot of businesses have got fantastic products and ideas, but actually that's made them create a business as opposed to they have business skills and management skills. So quite often I go in one angle and end up doing something else. So that's great because it's very varied. It's very interesting. I kind of do quite a lot around HR coaching type of work. So I find that immensely rewarding. And then with my other hat on, as I say, I work a lot with the WRA. I'm on the board of the WRA. And I'm also the technical lead, Wood Recyclers Association.
Wood Recycling Association.
Yeah.
And we had on Richard Coulson, who was the former chair of the Wood Recycling Association on episode 58. And that was thanks to you.
For pushing him forward, and now you're getting me back.
Absolutely. No, I meant to start at the start. And now I confessed I spoke to you at the CIWM. I think that's the first time I met you, the CIWM Christmas lunch in 2024. And I promised to get you on. And then I was sitting at the Christmas lunch a few weeks back, and I thought I've still not had Vicki Hughes on, so that's why you're here.
That's why I'm here. Well done. There you go. Note to self: what should you talk to at these lunches? I think
Absolutely.
That's what that is.
So how active is the Wood Recycling Association now?
Yeah, very. To be fair. Yeah, we represent over 90% of the sector, and that includes service members, end users, biomass plants, panel board mills, right the way through to all the equipment manufacturers and everybody in between, really. So large scale processors, waste management companies. So we're really fortunate because we have got a high level of representation. When we've gone and done work with the regulators, where we've pushed back on things that may not necessarily have been in our sector's best interest, or it's not been explained properly or communicated properly, we've worked really, really hard to try and kind of build that relationship so that we can influence and inform both to our members, but also from our members. And that's worked really, really well, to be fair. We did a big project, which was the Waste Wood Classification Project, which I try not to talk about now because I talked about for about 5 or 6 years. And even I'm fed up of it. But that was huge.
It's probably a good one to explain to our listeners, because I think people think wood's wood. I don't think they realise that some wood's hazardous for various reasons and so on.
So Waste Wood Classification Project was based on the premise that the agency thought that waste wood by definition would be hazardous. And actually what we said was, well, it isn't. There are hazardous forms of waste wood, obviously, treated railway sleepers and telegraph poles, etc. But we as the WRA have worked really, really hard over the last sort of 15 years to make sure that we had defined grades. So that was one of the first pieces of work we did in the sector, because everybody called the wood something slightly different. Everybody categorized it slightly different. And the key with that is that only certain types of wood can be used in certain types of outlets. And trying to follow the waste hierarchy, we're obviously trying to say the best, cleanest, untreated white wood should be kept for the prime product, which is basically animal bedding. And then you cascade through the different grades to get to grade A, clean animal bedding, grade B, which is still clean material, but has no board products in, and then grade C, which is the vast majority of the wood we have in the UK is grade C. It comes from household sites, it comes from industry. It's quite heavily weighted towards board products, which obviously our panel board mills don't want particularly. They'll take a small amount, but they don't really want that. They want the higher grades of wood. So we decided to actually set the grading system up, A, B, C, and then D grade was hazardous. I would say 99% of the sites in the UK that process wood, so wood processors, not waste management companies per se, don't accept or have hazardous wood on their licence. So when the agency turned around and said, well, we're going to classify a huge swathe of this material as hazardous, we kind of went, well, hang on a second. A, it's not. And B, if you do that, we can't send it to the outlets that we've spent the last 15, 20 years developing, which are panel board and biomass. So there's 4.5 million tonnes of waste wood in the UK, and currently we have a balanced market and we have enough inbound for the outbound that we've got. I say that with tongue in cheek because everybody knows there is a complete issue in the waste wood sector at the moment, but just hold that thought. So basically we worked with the agency and we said, it's not hazardous. And they said, well, prove it, quite rightly.
Mm-hmm.
So we started a process of desk research that basically, and worked with a number of different associations and treatment associations as well, and proved that the vast majority of waste wood in the UK is actually non-hazardous. But there were some items we weren't sure about. So we said, right, we will do some testing. So we started embarking on a process of testing. We then went out far and wide and said, this isn't just a waste wood issue. If you don't actually categorise your wood correctly and allow us to help by capturing that data and processing it, then you're going to lose the outlet, because fundamentally most sites can't take hazardous wood. And so we worked a lot in collaboration with other sectors, with other trade associations. And it was a really good project from that perspective. It got us all talking about it. It got lots of cross-pollination of information. The net result is we were able to demonstrate the wood, it wasn't hazardous. So as long as you don't put hazardous defined wood in, and there's a whole range of resources on the WRA website. I think it's wra.org.uk or @org.
We can share we can link.
Yeah, please do. There's loads of resources in there. There's loads of downloads. It talks about the specification sheet, what wood is to start with when it's coming in. So if you have wood to dispose of, what grade it is. It talks about the end markets, what's the best use following the waste hierarchy. And I should say we also have a lot of reuse members as well in our association. They do brilliant things with taking the wood out before it even gets to our members, our other members, if you like. And then it talks about, as I say, there's a guide where you can go on and actually do the assessment. So there is an assessment guide that says, you're not sure, so ask these questions. And if you answer them, you'll see whether it is or it isn't. But I have to say, and I would say this, but the WRA members are brilliant. They know their wood, they understand their market, they understand their customers. They've had a hell of a year, though, Alasdair, to be honest.
I was going to ask, what's the current issue? I've been hearing whispers of it through various things in Scotland. There's a bit of a supply issue, I believe, at the moment. What's
there is
caused
so
that?
It basically, waste wood in the UK is seasonal. The demand, because it comes from panel board mills and biomass predominantly, is very seasonal. So it's very heavy usage in the winter. But all of the plants tend to have their shutdowns in the summer. So biomass panel board they tend to have shutdowns in summer. So it's seasonal. So the demand is through the winter months from October through to about February, March. And then the inbound is from about March to October. We've over the years built up a really good balance. There are still customers, still members that export, because that's another really good balancing figure, and a good opportunity to keep the movement of the material in the UK as much as possible. But when that can't happen because a plant's gone down or an outage is longer, they can export it. However, this year we got, and sorry, I should say, sometimes in January and February, there isn't enough wood to do the demand.
Yep.
So it is always a real balance. Every site's got contingency plans as to what happens when their offtake goes off. But usually most of the wood processors now have got an offtake, which is a combination of a panel board mill or two and a biomass plant or two, either directly or indirectly via other large contracts. However, this year in March, one of the biggest plants in the UK at Tilbury went down unexpectedly and for at least 6 to 8 months. So we all went, and that's, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 tonnes a week. It's a lot of material, and it's in the southeast. So, I spoke to the regulators and said, this is going to be an issue. I guarantee it's going to be an issue because we're just about to get to peak. We were having dry weather, which means everybody does DIY. And it's going to be an issue. But unfortunately, the system has got the contingency in to balance itself for a few months. So actually, it didn't really become a real problem until probably April, May. But by April, May, another plant had gone down. And then we're into seasonal shutdown period. So plants that were planned to go down were going down. And it got to about July, August. And we're now onto the agency going, you have to do something, because I'm getting calls, and I know Julia, who's the exec director of the WRA, we're getting calls every day from people going, what do we do with this material? So the EA put out an RPS, which had limited impact, but did impact and did help certain sites. And then we saw some signs that it was going to be okay. And we were like, yay, we're going to just about limp through summer, get to winter, demand picks up. However, in Scotland, there was a fire at one of the plants in Scotland. And then the other big off-taker in Scotland, a biomass plant, actually went down unplanned and then gave a time frame, but that went out by another couple of months. So you add all that together, it sounds like the problem was in Essex and the problem was in Scotland, but it's not. The waste wood market in the UK is very, very transient. It moves all over the country, this material, dependent on demand, dependent on grade. So it impacted throughout the whole of the UK and Ireland. I've had numerous conversations with people from Ireland saying, what are we supposed to do with this material? And I think at first Scotland didn't really feel the impact, and I'm not sure Wales did initially, but both of those, in terms of our members' feedback, is that they've all stopped taking customers. They've even restricted contracted customers. Local authorities have been impacted, and some sites were not accepting wood at all from a public perspective. I have to say, I've been doing this, as I say, over 20, and I was having a conversation with the rest of the board, the WRA board, and none of us have seen anything like this before. And some of the guys on there have been doing it 30 plus years. None of us have seen it this bad. So we went back to the agency recently and said, help, this isn't going to get any easier, because actually we're all going into winter completely full. Even with the normal seasonal demand, we're still going to be full come March. It'll be different material because we'll have changed the material, but actually it'll still be very full. And they've been really supportive and issued a new RPS, which we've actually contributed to this time in terms of making sure the wording was as inclusive as it could be to ensure it had the maximum impact. So I'm hoping that over the next month or so, that actually that will allow processors to see how they can manage for the next few months. Also on the back of that, we're looking at the fire prevention plan as well, because the fire prevention plan was put in, must be 10 years ago, 10 years ago now, somewhere we started talking about it. And actually the fire science was done in conjunction with Wish and in conjunction with a number of our members. And it was almost the best we could do at the time because we had none. Now we're all coming to the position that actually saying that a wood stack being 4 metres high and separated by 4 or 6 metre separation distance, that's actually really quite small. And a lot of our operators have got amazing on-site, either firefighting, water suppression, CCTV. So actually, a lot of them have pushed that higher. So now what we want to do for the sector is say, actually, we want to now push that bottom limit so that we can see what we can get as a standard. And the agency are fully supportive of that, and actually have already said a time frame for us to start. So we're going to start gathering data from people that have already done the test to try and move that along, because that's some of the issue and some of the frustration. You've got some brilliant sites that are limited by their permit, and there's very little flexibility, and yet we know now, as we're talking, that wood is being sent to landfill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just
so
shocking.
That RPS, so that's a regulatory position statement by the Environment Agency. Has that been replicated in Scotland?
No, it isn't. Usually they're only in England. So Scotland and Wales and Ireland do something different. I have to say, SEPA have been amazing through this process. They've been incredibly supportive to the members. They've gone into the sites and tried to be practical and kind of worked with the operators. So whilst there has been issues, I do know that the feedback we've had on SEPA's engagement's been fantastic, to be fair.
It's quite scary to a certain extent that, you know, you've got a whole wood infrastructure, you know, the you know, as you say, it sort of self-regulates, self-balances and so on. If you think of the waste to energy sector with the residual waste, it's almost exactly the same. You just need a perfect storm of a number of big plants going down, and we've got exactly the same problem with residual waste.
All of these, I think part of it is all of them are relatively new in terms of infrastructure and process. And the wood market is probably only 20 years old in terms of, you know, the WRA is actually celebrating 25 years this year. But for the first few years of that, it was a handful of members.
Yeah.
And we were processing tiny quantities and usually only the cleanest wood into panel board. But we've now developed a whole range of animal bedding products. So really good use for recycled wood that gives it an extra life. And it all gets put into jeopardy because the minute the stock on sites is too much, those piles, that segregation just gets lost. You just don't have the space to do what the best thing is and the right thing to do. You're so busy measuring that you're inside your permit limits and that your stacks don't vary. But I think, as I say, having worked with sites quite often that have got issues, it's sometimes just the communication. It's kind of, there's a black and white that says we have a permit that says X. And when you actually sit down and speak to the operator and the regulator, usually separately, so there's no swearing, but quite often it is just a difference in language. And it's like, okay, well, you're telling them that they can't go higher or wider. How about if we tell you, rather than just saying no, how about if we tell you what we're going to do to mitigate the risk? Because that's actually what we should be regulating, the risk. And usually, but we get to that point where it's okay, well, we get it. Yeah, we hear you. You're going to add additional monitoring. You're going to put more probes in. You're going to have, you know, more staff on site, whatever that might be. But sometimes when you're under pressure on a site and having, you know, owned and operated sites, multiple sites for many years, I get it. The pressure of the day to day when those trucks are coming to the door and you're looking at your site going, where am I supposed to put this material? It can sometimes get lost in translation. So yeah, it's a tough one.
I fully understand that because, you know, quite often when a site's got a tonnage limit issue, they've not got any time to sort it. You know, if they're going to put a modification into the Environment Agency or SEPA, that's going to take 2 months at least. You know, the reality, yes, in theory they should plan ahead, but some of these things, you know, it's not always their fault. And then quite often that'll drive behaviour like putting waste to landfill that we're trying to avoid. So sometimes, you know, it's not been done for the right reasons, I think, in terms of strictly enforcing that tonnage limit or whatever it may be.
I think that's why SEPA have really stepped up, to be honest, because they've gone in and gone, you're absolutely right. The change in tonnages can happen within 2 or 3 days. So you are moving material, it's coming in, you're accepting it, you're segregating it, you're cleaning it, you're chipping it, you're sending it out. And that process runs. And then one day it doesn't. And you're told it's going to be a couple of days. Well, that's okay. We have contingencies for that. You're told it's a couple of weeks. You've got contingencies for that. But then there comes a point where there is nothing left. All the contingencies in the world cannot have prepared our sector for this that's happened this year. So then you'd hope for practicalities. But the thing is, it isn't always practical, as you say, because by the time you've got to the point where you're going to the agency to saying, help, I need some help, you potentially are at the limits of your permit anyway. Or even in some cases, non-compliant maybe, in which case you get an agency officer down and their default position is you're non-compliant. So I can't talk to you about the opportunity to move those goalposts because you're non-compliant. Just doesn't seem sensible when you know, and we've had it as a few already, that now we've got illegal dumping of waste wood. And it's, the sites that I say illegal, they've opened, they've got a processing plant and they're accepting waste wood in. So our members can't accept it. We actually had one of our members who'd been asked to supply machinery in there and plant and equipment, and they'd refused because they know that site is basically going to take it. Well, gate fees are at the highest they've ever been because people are desperate. They'll take it and it'll miraculously go up in smoke, no doubt at all. And it's been reported, but they're still taking material in. It's a really tough balance. I don't envy anybody in wood processing or actually anybody in the agency at the minute because it's hard graft either way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So moving on from the Wood Recycling Association, you have another hat because you are currently Vice President of Chartered Institute of Waste Management.
I am. I'm very proud to be as well. It's I've got a real deep affection for CIWM, Chartered Institution, because I feel like I have learned lots, met many, many people. I've got lots of new contacts. I've got lots of shared knowledge. And I really do feel, I genuinely believe that volunteering is the way that we can give back. But actually, side note, volunteering also gives you a lot as well. And I think some people think, oh, volunteering, that's my time for free. But how much we get back by just actually participating, going to the regional committee meetings, which are incredible and run by some really, really enthusiastic and genuinely interesting people whose perspective you'd never normally get in our day-to-day work. So, yeah, I think as a member organisation, CIWM offers its individual members loads of stuff. And quite often, I say this all the time, I'm not sure people know just how much they get for their membership. I think we spend a lot of time becoming associate members and then chartered and then fellows. But there is so much more to CIWM and so much more resources that we could access. The mentoring platform is brilliant. And again, for both mentoring, but being a mentee as well. And as I say, lots and lots of opportunities to get technical information. Tina and Richard in the technical team are just the font of knowledge. They've been around for a long time. They know all sorts of stuff, random stuff, I have to say, but stuff. And they get all sorts of inquiries, which are fascinating. But it just shows the depth of knowledge that's there. And I think that's what CIWM has. It has this depth of knowledge because of the membership and the fact that a lot of those members give back and share and engage. So, yeah, I'm obviously going to say it's a good thing, but I genuinely do believe it. It'd be a bit bad if I didn't. And the other big thing I think people don't use enough of is the circular magazine and the online and actual hard copy magazine. There's some amazing articles in there that are contributed by the membership. So it's relevant stuff and stuff you kind of go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And
I quite like the Q&A thing. I can't remember what they call it, the member inquiries that come through. And I thought, that's a hard question.
Really hard. Well, they have, I think, in the technical department, I think it's called the Friday Afternoon Club, which is all the weird and wonderful questions tend to come in on a Friday afternoon. So,
yeah.
But they've always got an answer for them. And also, I think the other thing I'm really, really impressed with, both collectively and individually, is the early careers ambassadors. I've kind of been involved in that from the start and seen Charlotte, who's the current.
Well, that was another conversation I had in the Christmas lunch 2024. We promised Charlotte, and we did actually have her on.
Well, Charlotte has been amazing and really inspirational. And that whole ambassador team just brings a different view and a different perspective to lots of things. So they're now really embedded in pretty much everything across CIWM, pretty much every committee, every SEG, the Policy Innovation Forum. So we get a different viewpoint. So early careers ambassadors are not necessarily younger people. It's anybody with less than 10 years experience. So we have a real cross-section of people, and the enthusiasm and the kind of fresh view of the world is just invaluable. So yeah, lots of good stuff going on there. The other thing that I thought I just actually must mention, Alasdair, is that next year this year, getting my years wrong, are actually hosting the ISWA exhibition in London. So it's the conference.
I saw that. I was actually going to get ahead of the game and book hotel rooms, actually.
Good.
Because I must confess, I've been a member of ISWA for probably 5 or 6 years now, and I've never gone to a single event.
Well,
how bad is that?
Very bad. We're just going to gloss over it, though.
We should probably say what ISWA is. ISWA is the...
Well,
Go on,
I'm
Vicki.
testing.
No,
You're testing me.
I'm struggling. International Solid Waste
Association.
There we go. It wasn't that hard, really.
Well, CIWM basically put a bid in with many other associations around the world and won it to come to London in November. And I understand that's the first time it's been here in about 30 years. So it's an amazing opportunity for our sector to raise awareness of what we do in the UK and Ireland. And I also think for certain businesses to engage in that process. There is an exhibition part to it, although I do think that's actually getting booked up really, really quickly because there's not many stands. But the main focus is around some site visits that are taking place that are being worked on with CIWM staff and also the regional committee for London because it's in the London area. But they're really keen to ensure that it has, all a membership included. I know that we've got people from Ireland and from Scotland, Wales, as well as obviously the London and Southern counties. So it's trying to be all inclusive, but the actual, it's not called an exhibition. It's the conference basically, but there are leaders and thought leaders from all over the world coming into London in November to talk about all things waste. So
what more could we want?
I know, we're going to be so excited. But yeah, it's going to be brilliant. And I think the thing for me is that it gives us an opportunity in the UK and Ireland to actually influence and impact and talk to what's going on, what's good for us, but also to listen and learn. So yeah, it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to that.
Good. So I've done my Googling while you were talking. Episode 67, Charlotte Davies, early careers president. And the other ones I've got is we did interview Tim Walker when he was president. That was episode 55.
There you go.
And the current president is David Greenfield, who might need to go on our list as well before he finishes. So when do you start officially as president, and what have you got? Every year presidents have a theme. What's yours going to be?
So mine starts in June. The inauguration is now being planned to be in York, which I'm very pleased about because I'm a member of the North East Regional Committee, so wanted it to be on kind of home turf.
Home turf, yeah.
Yeah. And also I want that to be a showcase for all things North East because, again, I think it's we've got some amazing people and companies in that area. My campaign, which is, I'm not actually sure how much I'm supposed to say, but, it's only between you and I. It'll be fine.
Absolutely. I'm not telling you.
It's fine. Is sector attractiveness. So I am really keen to get more people into our sector. And I think as a sector, we have a habit of talking to people already in our sector. So we're really good at going, isn't this sector amazing? And the conversation we always have, and we've even had it, is, how did you get into this sector? And 90% of the time, if I've asked this when I've done presentations, and people show of hands, how did you get into the sector? Most people fell into it, or actually turn around one day having been doing a job for 10 years and realise that's what they were in. So there's an element of how do we look outside of our current membership and our current sector. And you mentioned David Greenfield. David's campaign this year has all been around circular economy. And one of the things that became very clear is the circular economy, I'm not sure people really know what it is. We all use it as a terminology because I think it incorporates lots of stuff. But Tim and David are really involved in embedding that thought process. How do we change behavior further up the waste stream, if you like, further up the life cycle, to think about things before it gets to waste? And one of the things for me is that that's actually opened up a huge amount of doors, because circular economy, engineering, design, most of those people would never think that they've got anything to do with the waste sector. So it's a case of, how do we amplify what's already gone before us? How do we get more skills into our sector? Because again, the work that Dr. Adam Reed did was all around green skills. And how do we know there's a shortage of people, and we know the gap is somewhere dependent on whose numbers you're using. And we're currently waiting for the new reports all to land any time now. But, there's probably 150,000 jobs that we need in our sector over the next 10 to 15 years. So the whole aim of the project is to try and amplify and demonstrate what we do as a sector, and how we can show how interesting and vibrant a sector it is to people outside. And as I say, more and more people are sort of touching our sector. They like the terminology. Some people don't recognise the word waste as something they want to be in. So that's another thing we're looking at. How do we change the language to make sure we're talking the right language? I've got 2 sons, and when they sit around the table and I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Don't you want to be in the waste sector? They look at me like, no, thank you. That isn't what they said, as you can imagine. But I then say, what about resources, sustainability, recycling? Yeah, actually, that sounds interesting. So there is a language barrier as well. So the idea is to go out wide and far and amplify and demonstrate what a great sector this is to be in, how much growth there is, but also to showcase people that are in the sector currently what else there is out there. Because again, we can get stuck. We can come back from maternity leave or parental care, or just, fall into this sector, and we don't necessarily see what else is out there, what other opportunities there are. And when you talk about waste, people tend to think about operators, drivers, sorters. I think about chemists, I think about marketeers, I think about salespeople, as well as all of those other skills. So the aim is to amplify. One of the things I would say in terms of process is, I've got an ask, Alasdair, because I'm trying to get as much data before this process is done. I don't really want a report. I want something that's much more dynamic. So we're thinking of doing some case studies, and we're thinking to try and use real life experience. So I have a question that I'm trying to get answered in as many different places as possible, and an email address to actually send a reply to, which is, how did you fall into waste and why have you stayed? So it's Love It is the title of the email. Why do you love it? Because people don't just like this sector. We love it. There's so much enthusiasm and passion, isn't there, in this sector?
Absolutely.
And yet a lot of people didn't pick it as a career choice. So we're kind of trying to get under the skin of that and say, how did you fall into the sector and why have you stayed? What's made you stay? So that we can get some reference and some research on that. And the email address to send it to, if you do want to participate, is hello@sizzle, sizzle.org.uk.
I'm sure we can share that email address as well in the bio. No, you're talking to the converted here. So I've got two very strong views that one, the waste sector is very, very bad. Well, it's not bad. It talks to itself all the time, and it doesn't reach out as much as I think it probably should. And two, bit about the varied careers and the different careers people have got, and it's an absolute fascinating sector in terms of the opportunities that exist for people in the sector. So yeah, well, good luck with that campaign. I'm sure we can encourage people on a regular basis on this podcast to try and contribute.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm really excited about it, and having done the tour of all the, a lot of the regions and a lot of the Christmas events and talking to members in all sorts of different places, I know that people feel the same. And many times if I start that conversation, someone will give me a brilliant story about how they fell in, how they've developed, how they've been promoted. And And as I say, how they absolutely love it. And I just think it's a shame we can't share that wider. So that's the mission. Any good ideas for doing that as well, always welcome.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So that'll be a bit busy year for you then.
I think so, yeah. I think it will. But it's a real privilege, isn't it? I mean, it's, to be voted in by the membership to actually represent them in all the various guises. It's daunting, slightly terrifying, but actually it's really good fun already, because it's kind of a 4-year journey. You're junior vice president, senior vice president, and then past president. And the support you get from sort of CIWM central office is amazing. The resources and the people and the knowledge that's there is incredible and quite undervalued, I think, by many people, not knowing what goes on there. But when you get under the skin a bit and you realize just how much they do, just how much they influence policies, and they are being, very, very specific in terms of how they can help with, we have a P&I forum now, a policy and innovation forum. That's very strategic in terms of being able to support government input thoughts and processes, and to provide a voice for our industry and our sectors. So there's lots of stuff that people don't see. But yeah, it's a real privilege. And I have to say, the presidential team is amazing. It does feel like we're a family. When somebody can't do something, somebody else steps in. I say this because we're always looking, and at the moment we're just recruiting still for junior vice presidents. Alasdair, not mentioning any names, or
failed to complete that application.
Well, there you go. But it's a gift, and it is hard work, yeah, definitely, but it is actually very much worth it, I think. But although ask me again this time next year even, and then we can take it from there.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So looking back in your career, any highlights, any sections where you think, goodness, I'd love to be back there just doing that?
Do you know what? There is, and I think about that, and I think I'd love to be back at the time when it was Hadfields wood recyclers, and with the team of people I had around me at that time, who Jeff and Paul I still work with, but there's a lot of people that have moved on and grown and developed. But there was a real sweet spot at that point where it was really hard work, really, really hard work. We were growing and developing a business across multiple sites, but actually it was such good fun. And we were a group of people that got on and we liked each other's company. And I remember doing RWM one year, and people would come up to me and go, we want to be on your stand because this looks like it's a good fun. And it's like, do you know, it is. We work hard. I'd say we played hard, but not really. Just enjoyed kind of, the fun of all being together and the experiences. And yeah, I look back on that with really kind of, that was a golden time in terms of all the people.
Do you think that's been lost a little bit in business after COVID and so on? There seems to be a bit of I think everybody's feeling they're in a bit of a grind these days. How do we recover that sense of optimism, if you like?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I hadn't really thought about it. And I think my role changed after COVID. So it wasn't I couldn't do a direct comparison. But I look now and I think it is, I see a lot of the events that go on, or I'm at events, and there is joy at being with people and connecting and laughing and sharing that, it's hard work. Most of the time, life can be hard and difficult. And so for those few hours or for those meetings or with people who appreciate what you do and understand what you do, it's joyous, and it should be joyous. I think I'm all for life is hard enough. Let's every now and again remember that we're here to enjoy the journey as well as when the destinations. Yeah, I think it's just more of the same. And I do think that's where the networking comes in. I think you go to those events. I was lucky enough to go to Scotland last year, and the atmosphere, in fact, every Christmas event I've been to, or every event, the atmosphere is amazing. And it's mainly, I think, because of that, people in a room, able to relax for a few hours, able to talk about business, but not in a way that's a selling opportunity I think let's do more of that.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult bit. Is that I think people struggle to engage with that, or they've got out the habit of engaging with that networking type events, and once they're out the habit, they're not engaged, and then it gets harder and harder. So it's difficult.
We have to remind them. We've got to remind them what the benefits are, because you're right. And I think it's also, when you look at local authorities, there isn't enough time in the day. There's no money. It's seen as wasteful or something. But you look at the events that Larrock is a perfect example. Larrock is a great exhibition in terms of sharing knowledge. And there's the Scotland conferences, there's the Welsh, and the Irish conferences I went to last year. Amazing, really good, valuable information, lessons learned. But it is that, how do we get people to be able to communicate that message to their bosses to say, I need to be out of the office all day and it might cost you a bit of money for me to be there. That's a tough one. But I think we just keep excelling the virtues of why it's a good idea.
There we go. There we go. And then also looking back in your career, any disasters you had that you remember, think, oh, goodness, why did I do that?
Yeah, I do that regularly. I think one of them that I think it was around, I was in the ceramic industry for 10 years. So I've been in manufacturing pretty much my whole career. Although I have to say, I was thinking back, my very first job, I left school at 16 and my very first job was on a YTS. And it was a secretarial YTS.
Youth training scheme for the younger audience.
Youth training. And I'm actually slightly dyslexic, Alasdair, so I tend not to use initials very often because I jumble them up. But my very first role was as a secretarial trainee on a youth training scheme, £25 a week it was back then. And they put me in reception, and I absolutely loved answering the phone, as you can imagine, shy and retiring as I am. But the filing system didn't fare so well because I thought kind of the alphabet was optional. So I was just like, let's just put them out. So after a couple of weeks, they moved me on to telesales and found I loved that. That was kind of my niche. So I did that for a little while. But you know what? The funny thing is, that was actually in a panel board mill. Yeah, no, completely randomly in a panel board mill in Staffordshire. And then I moved around. I worked for a travel agent for a while. And then I went into the ceramics industry and I was in there for 10 years. And I loved that because I love that process of manufacturing. We take clay and we turn it into something else. And then I got asked to go and interview for a job in manufacturing, but in Trafford Park in Manchester, in a rubber processing plant. Completely different field, but actually what they wanted was somebody who'd got senior management experience to basically run these 3 sites in Manchester. And it was a big leap for me. And I remember a couple of days after I'd got there thinking, well, I can't spell any of the compounds. I've got no clue what they're talking about. And I'm just going to hang on by my fingertips here and, fake it till I make it a little bit, because it felt such a big step out of a sector that I'd known so well. But what actually I took out of that, and it wasn't straight away, and also the owners they were fighting all the time. So there's lots of conflict in that business and lots of stuff I didn't understand. So I did sit down there after about 6 months going, what have I done? Why have I made this move? But I kept relying on, it was my skills that they were after, not my knowledge of the sector. And I left there 5 years later when I'd had my first son to start my consultancy business. And actually, it was one of the best learning opportunities I had. I learned about conflict resolution. I learned about management. I was made a director there. I was responsible for all these people, and it was daunting and scary, but the team were amazing. And eventually I put in investors in people, and so I was so proud of that, from this business that was so fractured and difficult to actually having investors in people and the people there working together and the process being better. And so I really did at one point go, oh my gosh, I should have stayed in ceramics. But actually I'm glad I didn't, because I learned so much that I've used many, many times since.
It's good to hear about investors and people as well, that you had a good use for it.
Yeah, a lot of my career is, as I say, in McPhee now, we go in to do one thing and quite often I end up doing coaching, or I do quite a lot of personality assessments that then lead into, this is why you don't communicate effectively, because you're this type of person. And that usually salespeople and accountants, they don't talk the same language. So it stood me in good stead the whole way through. But interesting.
Good. So looking ahead to 2026, I'm going to give you a magic wand. What would you like to use it for? You can use it either for yourself, your presidential career, or you can use it for the big bad waste sector.
Do you know what? I was thinking twofold, really. 2026 has got such a lot of change coming, and there's a lot of things that are dropping this year. Lots of reports, lots of new changes, digital waste tracking, and we've got all the reports that have been done around skills. So I actually think that it's going to be quite a transformative year. I think if we get listened to, and I think that's the key, we really need to work together as a sector to amplify the voice into government, into other sectors we don't necessarily reach. So I think the sector's going to be fine if we all can group together. I think if I had a magic wand, though, I'd do something slightly different. And again, thinking about this in a wider context, when I was about 8, which I can remember back to, thank you, we did a project. No, you didn't. I'm just looking at your face and I'm preempting. We did a project on vandalism, and it sounds random, but we did it, and it was embedded into the curriculum. So we went and looked at this housing estate that was all run down. We did art. The art class was around the vandalism and the drawings. There was the woodworking was around how we repair things. There was the social value of litter picking and trying to make these spaces better. There was kind of English, how we described these houses. I can still remember it as being deeply rooted, deeply embedded in me from a perspective of learning about it across all of the curriculum. And if I had a magic wand, I would say to government, get the 7, 8 and 9-year-olds of the UK to talk about circular economy and sustainability and recycling. Get them learning the why. So as they get older and they go through that stage of, I don't care, I don't want to know, or actually I want a career, what kind of career can I have? They have that embedded knowledge of our sector, so that they can go out and do bigger and better things, because that's what we need. We need more knowledge, more engagement. So yeah, my magic wand is going to be used to zap government into action to get a whole swathe of our 8 and 9-year-olds actually engaged in our sector.
That's really interesting, actually, Vicki, because I've been contacted by the Rotary Club of Ayers. I used to be a member, and I try and help them where I can, and they contacted me. They're trying to do some sort of environmental sustainability type work, and they were saying, what do we do? What can we do? And they're already engaged with the primary schools and various things. They've got Youth Speaks and various other things. And I said, really, that's probably, what's missing at the moment, that engagement piece with the younger children. But it's actually really hard to point them to something. They're not waste experts, they're not sustainability experts. It's actually really hard to point them to a resource to say, look, we can train you up in this, and then you try and embed that.
Yeah, and deliver. I think it's that particular project. We had a local PC that used to come in and talk to us about it and the impacts of why you shouldn't do these things. And it's just really embedded. And I was talking to somebody I was at school with recently, and we were both reminiscing about the days that we spent around these derelict houses, picking litter and looking through broken glass and all these things. And you just think, at that age, they're so impressionable that if the government actually put the time and the money in the curriculum, but across the curriculum, not just, the social values, but actually into the art and into the history and learning all the parts and just little bits. It doesn't have to be they're experts. They just need to be a little bit that they can translate and make it real. I think that could be transformational for, in a couple of generations, we'd have a whole load of engaged sustainability enthusiasts.
That sounds perfect.
Then we can retire.
Well, absolutely. So my last question, which you've probably covered throughout this episode, is really any advice for younger versions of you coming into the sector? What do you suggest? Get on and do it.
Yeah, get on and do it. I think the thing for me is, I always say when I'm asked about what's the learning, what the takeaways are, is to volunteer for everything. When I had a real chip on my shoulder that I couldn't go to university, and I got into sixth form, but it just wasn't, my background, good working class folk. We couldn't afford for me to go to university. I needed to earn money, but I had a real chip on my shoulder because my friends went. And so I was determined to expand my knowledge from just what I was doing. So I volunteered for everything. And, I ended up doing all sorts of things that now I look back and laugh to myself and think, why did I do that? But actually, I did a course on risk assessment. And at the time, I'm like, everybody's like sitting on their hands while I'm popping my hand up to say, yes, I want to do it. But actually, years later, I have used that knowledge, if not the specific knowledge, the thought process behind it, the familiarity with the words has come back to me. So I always say volunteer for all sorts of stuff, because you never know where it's going to take you. And in this sector, there is so many opportunities to learn. And like I say, to cross-pollinate and to develop. So yeah, stick your hand up for everything is what I say.
That sounds like a good message to end. So thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your presidential career. I'm sure our paths will cross in 2026 at some point.
No doubt. Thank you very much. It's been lovely to have the chat. Thanks for the opportunity.
No bother. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next Thursday at 4 p.m. Don't forget to follow, share with friends, and send us your feedback at hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk.